The screen door slammed shut behind me, rattling the glass. My father, Bill, booming from across the manicured lawn, didn't even wait for me to set foot on the patio. "Danny boy, late as always," he called, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. My mother, Sue, glanced up from her martini, her lip curling as she took in my shirt, then dismissed me with a wave. "Still can't dress for company," she drawled, turning back to Mark's animated story. The gravel crunched under the tires of my '08 Subaru Outback as I pulled into the Miller driveway. 3 minutes past 4 o'clock. Late. Late, always off. The scent of grilling burgers and chlorine hung heavy in the humid July air, mixing with the sharp tang of freshly mown grass. My father, Bill, a senior partner at Miller and Associates, stood by the gleaming steel grill, tongs in hand, a wide smile plastered on his face for the neighbors, though it didn't quite reach his eyes when he saw me. "Danny boy, you finally made it," he boomed, his voice carrying across the meticulously landscaped backyard. "Thought maybe you got lost on the way." My mother, Sue, reclined in a cushioned patio chair, a gin martini in her hand, the ice cubes clinking as she raised it to her lips. She barely spared me a glance. "That shirt again, David?" she said, her tone flat. "We gave you Brooks Brothers gift cards last Christmas. Still have them?" She didn't wait for an answer, turning her attention back to my brother. Mark, 6 years younger, sat on the edge of the patio table, holding court. Harvard Business School, Goldman Sachs. He wore an expensive linen shirt, sleeves rolled up just so, revealing a watch that probably cost more than my car. He caught my eye, a glint of amusement there. "Glad you could tear yourself away from whatever it is you're doing these days," he said, a casual shrug. It wasn't a question. I managed a tight smile. "Business technology consulting," I offered, knowing it would land flat. It always did. Bill snorted from the grill. "Consulting, that's what they call unemployment these days, isn't it, Sue?" He flipped a patty, the grease hissing. Sue just hummed in agreement, taking another sip. My cousin, Jess Clark, sitting beside Mark, piped up with her usual cheerfulness. "Maybe you could be Mark's support staff, Dave. You're good with computers, right? Like you were at MIT, before you—" She trailed off, a little too brightly, but everyone knew what she meant. Before I dropped out. The ghost of that decision still haunted every family gathering, a silent witness to my perceived failures. I walked over to the cooler, pulling out a cheap domestic beer. The cold aluminum felt good in my hand. I leaned against the house, trying to fade into the background. Mark, however, seemed to thrive on the attention. He gestured expansively, describing his latest triumphs. "The market's on fire for AI, Dad. I've got an interview tomorrow at Horizon Technologies. They're booming. Heard great things about their security protocols." The beer can nearly slipped from my fingers. Horizon Technologies. My breath hitched. It was a new name, one I had chosen carefully just last year, to obscure its origins, to keep it quiet. My company. I'd built it from the ground up, coding late into the nights after I left MIT, after I'd moved out and cut ties. A private venture, growing steadily, successfully, but not in their world, not on their terms. "Horizon?" Sue's voice cut through my thoughts. "That's wonderful, Mark. Maybe you can put in a good word for David. Get him on the ground floor. Something entry level." She smiled, oblivious, a benefactor offering a scrap. "I'm good," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "The consulting keeps me busy." The lie felt heavy and thin at the same time. Bill emerged from the grill, carrying a tray of charred burgers. He stopped next to me, eyeing my Subaru, which was parked conspicuously next to his own Mercedes S-Class. "You know, Dave, that old jalopy of yours worries me. What will the neighbors think?" He patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like ownership. I looked at my reflection in the patio door, then at his expensive car. "Probably that I'm visiting the help," I muttered, but no one seemed to hear me over Mark's loud laughter at something Jess had said. The rest of the evening was a slow, steady drip of small cuts. My single status, my bachelor pad apartment, the vague nature of my work, the lack of a proper career, the general sense that I was still just drifting, a grown man who hadn't quite figured it out. Each jab was wrapped in concern, in advice, in a casual observation. Each one landed. The evening wore on, the sky darkening to a bruised purple, dotted with the first hesitant fireworks. I stood by the dessert table, picking at a piece of apple pie, the sweetness a faint counterpoint to the bitter taste in my mouth. Mark appeared beside me, his usual boisterous energy subdued. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Hey, Dave," he began. "You're, good with the tech stuff, right?" I raised an eyebrow, surprised. Mark rarely asked for my input on anything. Sometimes. He cleared his throat, fiddling with the cuff of his expensive shirt. "That Horizon Technologies interview tomorrow. Any tips? For the tech side, I mean." I saw it then, a flicker of something in his eyes, a brief, familiar fear that mirrored the one I'd carried for years. The pressure to perform, to meet expectations that were impossibly high. "What position are you interviewing for?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "VP of Strategic Partnerships," he confirmed, but his gaze dropped to his shoes. "Look, between us, Dad's golf buddy Richard Davis pulled some strings. It's a pretty big jump. I'm a little out of my depth." He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Goldman Sachs has been a nightmare, Dave. The hours, the pressure. It's not what I thought it would be. But I can't tell Mom and Dad that. They'd never understand." His voice was hushed, almost a whisper. This is my chance to pivot without looking like I'm giving up. I chewed slowly on my pie, considering his words. He was reaching out in his own way. "Be honest," I finally said. "In the interview, Horizon values authenticity. Don't try to be someone you're not." Mark looked at me, clearly disappointed. "That's it? No angles, no buzzwords?" "Trust me on this one," I insisted. "Just be yourself. Tell them what you can bring, what you really want." It felt like a small offering, a piece of advice I genuinely believed in. Before he could push back, Bill's booming voice cut through the air. "Mark, come here, son. Tell Mr. Henderson about that incredible deal you just closed." Mark's shoulders straightened, and the mask of the perfect son snapped back into place. He gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod, and then was gone, enveloped by the admiring crowd. Later, as I was making my escape, sliding into the driver's seat of my Subaru, my mother appeared at the open window. The porch light cast a pale glow on her face. She held out a folded check. $5,000, she said, her voice soft, unusual for her. "I worry about you, David. This could help. Get that car fixed, maybe put a down payment on something nicer. You're still young, you need a reliable man." The last words were a slip, a revealing glimpse into her constant concern that I was still unmoored, still a disappointment. I looked at the check, then at her face, the lines of worry etched around her eyes. For a moment, I considered telling her about Horizon Technologies, about the company I'd built, about the Tribeca penthouse she didn't know I owned. But the words wouldn't come. What would it change, really? Would it make her worry less or just shift her expectations? I simply took the check and folded it into my wallet. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice hoarse. Then I started the engine and drove away in silence, the glow of the distant fireworks fading in my rearview mirror. Back in the quiet solitude of my penthouse, overlooking the glittering expanse of the city, I pulled Mark's resume from my encrypted drive. I'd had Alex, my COO, pull it after Mark's call. Page after page of polished bullet points, impressive titles, and carefully embellished details. Quantitatively driven, results-oriented leader. The usual corporate jargon. A text came through from Alex. "Still interviewing Mark Miller tomorrow?" "He's a Miller, right?" I typed back. "Yes, keep it confidential." I leaned back in my chair, the city lights a distant hum. DM Reed, CEO of Horizon Technologies. It had been a deliberate choice to use my middle name, to distance myself from the scruffy, underachiever Dave Miller. It was a new identity, forged in the fires of frustration and ambition. A secret life, built brick by painstaking brick, far from the critical gaze of my family. A life where I was more than just Bill and Sue's Danny boy. A life where I was finally my own man. The weight of Mark's secret, now intertwined with mine, settled heavy in the silence of the room. The polished chrome elevator doors hissed open, depositing me onto Horizon's executive floor. The downtown headquarters hummed with a controlled energy light spilling in from the floor to ceiling windows, reflecting off the glass partitions in minimalist art. As DM Reed, CEO of Horizon Technologies, this was my domain, a world meticulously crafted, far from the Miller family's reach. I walked through the quiet hall towards Conference Room Alpha, the smooth silence of my Italian leather shoes on the concrete floor, a stark contrast to the clatter of my old Subaru. I thought about the years, the relentless grind, the sleepless nights fueled by cheap coffee and the biting memory of my father's sneer, my mother's pity. Unemployment, consulting. Every dismissive word had been a brick laid into the foundation of this empire. Horizon wasn't just a company, it was a defiant answer, a quiet war against a lifetime of being underestimated. At precisely 9 o'clock, Mark arrived, cutting a sharp figure in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His hair was impeccably styled, his handshake firm, radiating a practiced confidence. He scanned the reception area, a slight frown creasing his brow as he looked for a recognizable face. He certainly didn't recognize DM Reed, the scruffy dropout who was his older brother. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. "Mr. Miller?" I asked, my voice calm, professional. "DM Reed, thanks for coming in." I extended a hand and he gripped it firmly, his gaze steady, entirely devoid of recognition. "Right this way." I ushered him into Conference Room Alpha, a sleek space dominated by a long, dark wood table and a wall-mounted screen displaying our company logo. The chairs were ergonomically designed, silent on their casters. I gestured for him to take a seat, then settled across from him, my expression carefully neutral. My COO, Alex, was sitting next to me, taking notes on a tablet. "So, Mark," I began, my voice even, "tell us what interests you about the VP of Strategic Partnerships role at Horizon Technologies." He launched into a polished performance. He spoke of synergy, leveraging partnerships for transformative growth, and disrupting established paradigms. His words were smooth, articulate, brimming with the kind of corporate jargon that sounded impressive but lacked any genuine depth. He rattled off bullet points from his resume, each one a testament to his ability to talk a good game. "You mentioned leading several major deals at Goldman Sachs," I interjected, allowing a slight pause. "Specifically the 2021 acquisition of OmniNet Solutions. Your resume states you spearheaded the technical integration strategy. Can you elaborate on the specifics of that integration? The challenges you faced? The proprietary solutions you implemented?" I leaned forward slightly, watching him. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, almost imperceptible. His smile tightened. "Well, as the team leader," he began, his voice maintaining its confident pitch, "my role was to oversee the broader strategic direction. We collaborated closely with the technical teams, ensuring alignment with our overarching business objectives." He stuck to the script, generic and vague, like a politician avoiding a direct answer. He was still oblivious, still believing this was a standard interview. I made a mental note. I pressed him on his vision for Horizon's future, watching his discomfort as he struggled to articulate anything beyond the usual industry buzzwords. When I posed a more technical question about our AI security protocols, a core component of Horizon's success, he floundered. He offered high-level corporate answers about scalable architecture and robust frameworks, but provided no specific examples, no genuine insight. He'd clearly skimmed the white papers, but the technical understanding wasn't there. Internally, I ticked off each embellishment, each glossed-over detail. His generalist approach, his reliance on superficial presentations, stood in stark contrast to the deep, granular work that built Horizon. I shifted tactics. "Mark, beyond the titles and the deals, what truly motivates you in your career? What do you want to achieve here personally?" I tried to get past the practiced persona to see if there was anything authentic beneath. He brightened, perhaps thinking this was an easier line of questioning. "Impact," he said, nodding decisively. "Innovation. I want to be part of something that truly changes the game, to leave my mark on the industry." More buzzwords, devoid of concrete meaning. He used game changer twice in the next minute. I let him talk, letting him dig his own hole with superficial answers and recycled phrases. He seemed to relish the sound of his own voice, completely confident in his performance. The initial part of the interview concluded, Mark clearly believing he'd nailed it, utterly blind to the silent assessment taking place across the table. Mark finished his monologue, concluding with a flourish about his unwavering commitment to excellence. He leaned back, a self-satisfied smile playing on his lips, completely convinced he had charmed his way through. Alex, my COO, gave me an almost imperceptible glance, a silent question about how I wanted to proceed. I let a moment of silence hang in the air, the hum of the ventilation system, the only sound. Then I leaned forward, my hands flat on the polished conference table. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the lingering confidence Mark exuded. "Do you recognize me, Mark?" He blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. His practiced smile returned, a little wider now. "Should I, Mr. Reed? I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting outside of today, though I certainly appreciate the opportunity." He gestured vaguely, his attempt at professional charm unwavering. I maintained eye contact, letting the words sink in slowly. "It's Dave, Mark." My voice dropped lower, the name tasting foreign on my tongue after so long. "Your brother, David Miller." The effect was instantaneous, devastating. The color drained from Mark's face as if someone had pulled a plug. His eyes, moments ago so confident, widened with disbelief, then horror. He stared at me, then frantically around the sleek, minimalist room, as if searching for an escape, a hidden camera, anything to explain what he was hearing. "Dave? No, this isn't possible," he stammered, his voice thin, barely audible. He looked utterly lost, like a child who had wandered into a nightmare. "It is," I confirmed, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "DM Reed is me. Horizon Technologies is my company. Every piece of code, every line of investment, every single strategic partnership you spoke so eloquently about, Mark, it came from me. From the underachiever you and our family have mocked for years." I watched him, my gaze unwavering. "Do you remember the barbecue yesterday? Dad calling my consulting unemployment? Mom telling me to use the Brooks Brothers gift cards? Jess suggesting I be your support staff? And you, Mark, asking me what I did these days?" I listed each instance, each subtle jab, each cutting remark, feeling the accumulated weight of them. "You applied to work at a company run by the man you all dismissed as a failure." Mark tried to interject, his composure completely gone. "But how? You were consulting. You said—" He choked on the words, his throat tight. I cut him off, my voice sharp. "A lie, Mark. One I used to avoid exactly this kind of judgment. To avoid the pity, the condescension, the endless comparisons to your perfect path." I pushed a printed copy of his resume across the table towards him. "And speaking of lies, let's talk about this." I tapped a finger on a bullet point under Goldman Sachs. "Leadership roles in major deals, spearheaded technical integration." I looked into Omninet, Mark. "You were on the team, yes, but you were a junior analyst, not a leader. And the technical integration strategy? That was outsourced to a third-party firm, not something you spearheaded." His eyes darted from the resume to me, then to Alex, who remained impassive. He shrunk further into the expensive ergonomic chair, his shoulders slumping. "You weren't just out of your depth, Mark," I continued, my voice measured. "You were outright misleading potential employers, embellishing your experience, taking credit for work you didn't do." He couldn't meet my gaze, his face a sickly pale. He looked utterly shattered, the confident, polished facade cracking into 1,000 pieces. His hands, which had been so steady moments before, now trembled visibly as he gripped the edge of the table. "This isn't just an interview, Mark," I stated, the words hanging heavy in the air. "This is a reckoning." The finality of the statement seemed to break something inside him. He trembled, a subtle shudder running through his frame, the perfect sun finally exposed. Mark slumped in the chair, his face a landscape of humiliation and fear. His confident posture had evaporated, replaced by a defeated slump. He gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles were white. "It was hell, Dave," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Pure hell. Goldman Sachs. It's not what anyone thinks. It's just endless hours, constant pressure to outperform, to make impossible numbers. Every single day was a battle. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. And Mom and Dad, they just kept pushing. Every call, every dinner, it was about promotions, bonuses, networking. I couldn't tell them I was drowning. I had to be the golden child. I always had to be perfect for them. He swallowed hard, his throat working. My engagement to Beth, it's largely for appearances. Her family has connections. It looks good on paper for Dad's golf buddies, but it's not real, not really. He paused, a new wave of shame washing over him. His gaze dropped to his hands, trembling on the table. And I cheated on Beth, Dave. More than once. It's why I need this pivot so badly. If I lose this job, if this all comes out, everything collapses. My life, my reputation, everything Mom and boys built up around me. He looked back at me, desperation etched into every line of his face. Please, Dave, just give me this job. It's my only way out, my only chance to escape all of it. Please, don't tell anyone. I'll do anything. I listened, my own expression carefully blank. A part of me, the part that had chafed under their judgment for so long, felt a cold surge of vindication. He wasn't so different after all. He was trapped, just as I had felt trapped. But beneath that, a surprising pang of pity stirred. I saw in his genuine desperation a reflection of my own past struggles, the suffocating weight of expectations that had almost crushed me. He was broken, truly broken, in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. So, I said, my voice cutting through his pleas, you want me to give you a job based on lies and a false identity, to cover up more lies, to perpetuate the very facade you claim to be desperate to escape? He nodded frantically, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. I'll change, Dave, I swear. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll be a good brother. I need this chance. I'll prove it to you. I leaned back, considering the full weight of his confession. The years of pressure, the sham engagement, the infidelity, the embellished resume. It was a complicated mess, a tangled web of deceit spun to satisfy the Miller's rigid ideals of success. His predicament was deeper, darker than I had imagined. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up, a stark glow in the controlled lighting of the conference room. Mark watched, his eyes wide, confused. I tapped a few icons, then placed the phone on the table between us, the recording light blinking faintly. Mark, I said, my voice steady, I'm recording this. Say everything again. Tell us about Goldman Sachs, the pressure from Mom and Dad, the engagement, Beth, the infidelity, all of it. His eyes widened further, fear warring with a flicker of indignation. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The struggle was visible on his face, but the desperation won. He knew this was his only option. He took a shaky breath. Okay, he whispered, his voice trembling. Okay, Dave. It was hell at Goldman. Pure hell. And he started again, his confession echoing in the quiet room. Each damning word captured and stored, a permanent record of his undoing. If you've been gripped by Dave's quiet reckoning, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Mark finished his recorded confession, his voice raw, his eyes red-rimmed. The room felt heavy with the weight of his admissions. I let the recording continue for another minute, just to be sure, then stopped it, the blinking red light extinguishing. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Mark, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet, I won't give you the job. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a fresh wave of despair. But why? I told you everything. I laid it all out. I said I'd change, Dave. I said I'd work hard. His voice rose, tinged with a desperate plea. Because this job, I explained, requires honesty, integrity. You've demonstrated neither. And what you've confessed, while perhaps a measure of your desperation, doesn't change the fact that you actively misrepresented yourself and your experience. My tone was flat, leaving no room for negotiation on that front. He stared at me, uncomprehending. Then what was all this for? This, I said, leaning forward, is your choice. You must confess everything. The job lies, the cheating, the misery at Goldman, to the entire family. Bill, Sue, Jess, all of them. And most importantly, to Beth. His face crumpled, a genuine, wrenching sound escaping his throat. I can't. They'll disown me, Dave. They'll never forgive me. Beth will leave me. She'll tell her family, and then everything will be ruined. My whole life, it will be over. The terror in his eyes was palpable. He looked like a cornered animal, seeing no way out. I picked up my phone, the recording icon still visible on the screen. Then this goes public, I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. Every word, every confession. Your choice, Mark. You either tell them the truth yourself, or I will ensure they hear it. From you. He slumped back, burying his face in his hands, agonizing over the impossible decision. I watched him, feeling no triumph, only a cold sense of inevitability. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about something deeper, a rebalancing of scales that had been tipped for far too long. I gave him the deadline, my words clear and unyielding. You have until tomorrow to tell them. If I don't hear from you, confirming you have done it, then I will. Later that day, back in the quiet hum of my penthouse, I carefully drafted a text message. My fingers hovered over the screen, the weight of the words immense. This was it, the point of no return. I opened the family group chat, a chat I rarely participated in, usually just a recipient of my mother's passive-aggressive updates. Subject, important announcement. Horizon Technologies, I typed. Then with a deep breath, hello everyone, this is David, or as most of you know me, DM Reed. I am the CEO and founder of Horizon Technologies. I paused, imagining the shockwaves this would send through their carefully constructed reality. I would like to invite you all to a special tour and announcement at Horizon headquarters tomorrow. Insert date. Please arrive at insert time in the lobby. There's something important I need to share with you all. Mark, please ensure Beth joins you. I reread it, making sure every word was precise, every implication clear. The blast radius would be immense, I knew. It would shatter the fragile peace of their world, expose their assumptions, and force them to confront a truth they had actively ignored for years. I pressed send. A moment later, Alex's text flashed on my screen. Ready for the fireworks? I typed back, simply, ready. I then reviewed the recording of Mark's confession, listening to his desperate, broken voice. It was a tangible weapon, a stark contrast to the invisible slights and dismissals I had endured for so long. There was no turning back now, the stage was set. The next morning, the Miller family arrived promptly at Horizon's sleek lobby, their faces alight with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Bill, immaculate in a pinstripe suit, beamed. Sue, in a tailored dress, held a small, expectant smile. Mark, looking less assured than yesterday, but still projecting an air of importance, had Beth on his arm, her eyes bright. Even Jess seemed genuinely excited. They thought they were here to celebrate Mark's next big step. Alex, my COO, met them in reception, her expression perfectly professional, and ushered them into the main conference room. The large table sat empty except for a discreet speaker and a projector remote. The chairs were arranged facing the screen, a clean Horizon Technologies logo displayed against a serene blue background. The atmosphere was thick with their unspoken assumptions, their comfortable belief in Mark's trajectory. I walked in a moment later, dressed in a sharp, dark suit, my demeanor cool and composed. My gaze swept over their faces, registering their eager expressions, their almost palpable sense of ownership over this moment. Good morning, I said, my voice steady, professional. Thank you all for coming. Bill, ever the patriarch, stepped forward, his hand extended, a wide smile on his face. Mr. Reed, a pleasure to finally meet you. Bill Miller. And this is my wife, Sue, our daughter-in-law, to be Beth, and our nephew, Jess. He clapped Mark on the shoulder, a gesture of immense pride. Mark here tells us great things. So where's his new office? He said you wanted to make a special announcement. I took Bill's hand, my grip firm. The announcement, Mr. Miller, I replied, my voice softening slightly, is me and the truth. Then slowly, deliberately, I reached up and removed my glasses, tucking them into my jacket pocket. I met Bill's eyes, then Sue's, then Mark's. Dad, Mom, Jess, it's David. David Miller. A profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the hum of the projector. For a beat, they simply stared, their faces a tableau of confusion. Then the silence shattered. "What is this, a joke?" Bill roared, his face turning a deep, alarming crimson. His hand instinctively went to Mark's shoulder, gripping it tighter. "Daniel, what kind of sick game are you playing?" Sue gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her martini-fueled composure instantly gone. "Daniel, what have you done?" she whispered, her eyes darting between me and Mark, as if searching for an explanation. Mark, beside Beth, had gone ashen, his previous confidence completely evaporating. He simply stared at me, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. Beth, sensing the shift, looked from Mark to me, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. I ignored their exclamations, my gaze unwavering. I picked up the remote and, with a click, projected Mark's resume onto the screen behind me. Arrows and red circles appeared, highlighting the embellished job titles, the exaggerated responsibilities, the outright fabrications. "This is the resume Mark submitted for the VP of Strategic Partnerships role," I explained, my voice calm, factual, almost academic. "As you can see, there are discrepancies." I let the image hang there for a moment, letting them absorb the visual evidence of Mark's deceit. Then, with another click, the screen changed. The Horizon Technologies logo reappeared, but from the discreet speaker on the table, a voice began to play. Mark's voice. Broken, raw, desperate. "It was hell, Dave, pure hell. Goldman Sachs. It's not what anyone thinks. It's just endless hours, constant pressure." The room went utterly still. Bill and Sue's eyes snapped to Mark, then back to the speaker, then to me. Mark himself recoiled as if struck, his face contorted in agony. Beth, initially confused, listened intently, her brow furrowed. And Mom and Dad, they just kept pushing. I had to be the golden child. My engagement to Beth, it's largely for appearances. Beth gasped, a strangled sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes widened, a dawning horror replacing the apprehension. "And I cheated on Beth, Dave, more than once. It's why I need this pivot so badly." The words hung in the air, damning and irrefutable. Beth's face crumpled, a raw, gut-wrenching cry escaping her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her body shaking with betrayal. Bill and Sue stared at Mark, their faces a mixture of utter disbelief, disgust, and a deep, profound, shattering realization. Their perfect son, their golden child, had just been exposed as a liar and a cheat in the most public and humiliating way possible. The room was thick with shock, betrayal, and a building fury that felt almost volcanic. The last word of Mark's recorded confession faded into the silence. Beth's raw, broken sobs filled the void, echoing in the pristine conference room. Her face was a mask of utter devastation, tears carving paths through her makeup. She looked at Mark, her eyes burning with a pain that was almost unbearable to witness. "Is this true, Mark?" she choked out, her voice trembling beyond control. "All of it? The engagement? A sham? The cheating?" Mark, humiliated beyond words, could only manage a slow, miserable nod, his gaze fixed on the polished floor, unable to meet her accusing eyes. He was a shadow of the man who had walked in moments ago. With a guttural cry of anguish, Beth tore the sparkling engagement ring from her finger. With a violent, desperate motion, she hurled it at Mark, the diamond glinting briefly before it bounced off his chest and clattered onto the floor. "You bastard!" she screamed, her voice cracking. Then, without another word, she stumbled out of the room, her sobs fading as she disappeared down the hall. The air in the room crackled with a fury so intense it felt physical. Bill's face, already crimson, darkened further. He turned his rage-filled eyes on me. "How could you do this, Daniel? How could you do this to your own brother? To this family?" His voice boomed, full of outrage, but beneath it, I could detect a tremor of fear, of something breaking. Sue, pale and trembling, finally found her voice. "David, please stop this. You've gone too far." She reached a hand out, a plea in her eyes. I met Bill's furious gaze, my voice steady, unyielding. This isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about truth, about seeing what's real. My eyes swept across their faces. For years, you dismissed me. Unemployment, consulting. You made me feel like a failure, a permanent disappointment. You pushed Mark into a corner, making him feel like he had to be the golden child, to lie and cheat just to keep up appearances for your reputation, for your golf buddies. Jess, normally so cheerful, tried to interject, "But Dave, Mark's just had a tough time. You're being cruel." I turned to her, my voice sharp. "Cruel? You suggested I be his support staff yesterday, Jess. You reminded everyone about my MIT dropout status. You all contributed to this. You created a world where Mark felt he had to lie, and where I had to hide who I really was just to escape your judgment." Bill sank back into his chair, the fire in his eyes slowly dimming, replaced by a dazed, utterly defeated expression. The exposure of his golden child's lies, his infidelity, the sham of his celebrated career, it was too bad. His world, built on appearances and carefully cultivated success, was crumbling. Mark, a crumpled, silent figure, sat perfectly still, a shell of his former self. "The little computer thing I was working on after I left MIT," I continued, my voice measured. "The one you all scoffed at, it became Horizon Technologies, a billion-dollar company. My company." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You wanted a successful son, Dad. You had one. You just never bothered to look beyond your own expectations, beyond the narrow definition of success you created for us." I looked at them, the shattered remnants of their pride scattered across the polished floor. "You cultivated a culture of lies and appearances," I stated, the final truth hanging heavy in the air. "And this, right here, right now, is the harvest." The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was a silence filled with the echoes of shattered illusions, of irreversible truths. Eventually, Bill, Sue, and Jess rose, their movement slow, like people walking through thick mud. They didn't look at me or at Mark. They simply walked out, their perfect image irrevocably shattered, their family pride in tatters. Months later, the Miller family dynamic remained fractured. There was no grand reconciliation, no sudden forgiveness. Mark was in therapy, genuinely grappling with the deep-seated issues and the fallout of his choices. He'd lost his job at Goldman Sachs, the gilded cage now empty, and was struggling to rebuild a life free of the perfection he'd chased for so long. Bill and Sue were humbled. Their social standing, once impeccable, was tarnished. They were forced, for the first time, to confront their own roles in the family's dysfunction. Beth Carlson had moved on, starting a new life focused on healing, far, far from the Miller's orbit. I continued to lead Horizon Technologies, finding unexpected solace in the truth of who I was. I still offered Mark support, but it was guidance, not enablement. The $5,000 check from Mom, never cashed, was anonymously donated to a charity for young entrepreneurs. My relationship with Alex Stone had deepened, built on a foundation of trust. Looking out at the city's skyline from my penthouse, I reflected on the quadrangle. It had been brutal, but it had cleared the air. The future of the Millers was uncertain, but for the first time it was built on a foundation of honesty. A quiet, resolute sense of peace settled over me. Months later, the Miller family dynamic remained fractured. There was no grand reconciliation, no sudden forgiveness. Mark was in therapy, genuinely grappling with the deep-seated issues and the fallout of his choices. He'd lost his job at Goldman Sachs, the gilded cage now empty, and was struggling to rebuild a life free of the perfection he'd chased for so long. Bill and Sue were humbled. Their social standing, once impeccable, was tarnished. They were forced, for the first time, to confront their own roles in the family's dysfunction. Beth Carlson had moved on, starting a new life focused on healing, far from the Miller's orbit. I continued to lead Horizon Technologies, finding unexpected solace in the truth of who I was. I still offered Mark support, but it was guidance, not enablement. The $5,000 check from Mom, never cashed, was anonymously donated to a charity for young entrepreneurs. My relationship with Alex Stone had deepened, built on a foundation of trust. Looking out at the city skyline from my penthouse, I reflected on the kitchen. It had been brutal, but it had cleared the air. The future of the Millers was uncertain, but for the first time it was built on a foundation of honesty. A quiet, resolute sense of peace settled over me.